If there's one thing that Pixar's Cars franchise is known for, it's the sheer amount of content produced with its name attached to it. As of 2025, there have been 5 Cars movies, 3 TV shows, over a dozen short films, a bunch of video games, and who could forget the countless pieces of Cars merchandise released over the years. And with so much Cars content, it would only make sense for some of it to fall into obscurity or get cancelled, never seeing the light of day. The Cars franchise is one that has a bunch of lost and cancelled media, but despite how big the IP is, it's never really discussed a whole lot by either the Cars or larger lost media community. And the few that do get some spotlight don't have any active search efforts to find them. So today, I wanted to cover as many pieces of lost and cancelled Cars media as I could find, from the well-known to the barely talked about. Maybe you'll learn a few things about Cars you didn't know before, and maybe it'll inspire somebody to begin searching for these pieces of lost media. Strap in, this is going to be a long one. Something that's very common in the animation industry are animation tests. They're not an exam or anything, but rather a short piece of animation done to see what concepts the crew are working on can look like in a finished film. Pixar is no stranger to this practice, although the animation tests from their earlier films are the most interesting, since they tend to be very different from the final product. Take this animation test for Toy Story made in 1992 for example. Woody and Buzz have designs very different from the final film, looking a lot more like concept art of them from the time. They're voiced by completely different people, sounding nothing like either Tom Hanks or Tim Allen, and Woody in general is a much more mean-spirited character, due to Disney higher-ups wanting the film to be more edgy at the time this test animation was produced. How about this one made for Monsters Inc? Mike has sharper teeth and no arms, while Sully's just a completely different character. Cars was one of Pixar's early films to have these animation tests depicting a radically different version of what the final film would be like. The most well-known of these being a piston cup race depicting early designs for Lightning McQueen, Chick Hicks, and Luigi, and went on to have footage of it be used in Cars' original 2004 teaser trailer. But unlike Toy Story and Monsters Inc., which have had most, if not all of their early animation tests released in full via DVD extras, none of Cars' early animation tests are publicly available in full. There are plenty of small snippets of them, a lot originating from Cars' Blu-ray release, but they aren't very long, lasting around 10 seconds or less, and any audio from these tests can't be heard and are instead replaced by commentary from a Pixar crew member. The only test animation that we seem to have in full as of now is the piston cup race I mentioned earlier, and even then, we don't know how much the footage of it we see in the trailer was altered from its original version. It's very possible that there were sections of this animation that were cut from the trailer for time, or music and sound effects that weren't in the test were added to the trailer. It's really confusing why Pixar's never released any of these animations in full, especially when they've done so with their other films. Why wouldn't they just put this in one of Cars' DVD or Blu-ray releases? Well, it's never been confirmed, but the reason might be that Pixar themselves aren't the proudest of these early animation tests. You see, something that the animators really struggled on making Cars was the movement of the characters themselves. Looking at some of the movie's test animations, even ones from later in development when the character designs were finalized, the cars move in a very cartoony squash and stretch way, something that Cars director John Lasseter didn't like, wanting them to move in a way that was still expressive, but still looked like they were cars. You know, a large mass of metal, not a Looney Tune. In the end, the animators were able to strike this balance with the final film, but these animation tests not quite being up to Lasseter's standards might have been why they were never included in a DVD or Blu-ray release of the movie. Something similar actually happened during the making of Finding Nemo. That movie's director, Andrew Stanton, wasn't satisfied with the initial animation tests for the film, believing that the ocean environment wasn't realistic enough, and made the animators reference live-action footage to make the final film look better. And what do you know, we've never seen that early test in full either. So, Now that we know exactly what is lost and why, are there any ways to find it? Well, I did some digging, and it seems like the answer at this point is sadly no. I decided to look up as many animators as possible that worked on the first Cars, hoping to find a demo reel or something containing clips from one of these tests, but they ended up being mostly unsuccessful. Not only were there plenty of animators who worked on Cars that are still at Pixar, meaning that releasing these could put their jobs at risk, but also Cars came out in 2006. Not only is that almost 20 years ago, but also during a time where the internet wasn't quite as mainstream as it is today. And due to these two factors, plenty of these animators had a little to no online presence, or had sadly passed away in the years since its release. Even the animators that I was able to find a demo reel for didn't have any clips from these animation tests, only the final film, meaning that they probably hadn't worked on or held onto these test animations. There were only two places where I was able to find anything new relating to them. The first was a paper by Pixar's RenderMan staff going over the creation of Cars' ray tracing effects. It has multiple images to showcase what the paper talks about, and two of them showcase reflection tests done to a model of Luigi created during Cars' pre-production. It's not the same as the one seen in the small snippets of the animation tests we've seen. It seems to be one created even earlier, which is pretty cool to see, even if it looks like something I'd see in the Autobots, not Cars. The second thing I was able to find came from former Pixar story artist and Cars screenwriter, I'm going to be butchering this name for sure, I already know it, Jorgen Kluben, I don't know, I'm sorry, whose website probably has the largest amount of early Cars material available to the public. This includes the little yellow car, a rejected pitch he created that would later go on to inspire Cars, beatboards he created for the final film story, character art containing early designs for characters like Lightning and Sally, as well as characters that didn't make the final cut such as Mr. Windshield or Dutch Packard, and an image showing the models for both Luigi and the race cars used in the Piston Cup test animation, although the Piston Cup racers are missing their decals. Neither are as big as finding new images or clips from these test animations themselves, but Kluben even having this image does give us more information about these test animations than we knew previously. You see, Kluben left Pixar before Cars could be completed at some unknown point in 2003, meaning that these very early test animations must have been completed sometime before he left. We also know that some of the earliest pieces of Cars storyboards and concept art date back to early 2002, although there are some undated pieces of concept art that seem to be even older, maybe even from late 2001. That leaves us with a general time frame of late 2001 to 2003 for when these test animations were created, although I think it's way more likely that these test animations are from 2002 to 2003. I bet a lot of people who have done research into Cars' development already thought that, but having it straight up confirmed is a nice thing. And that's everything we can really do about these test animations right now. It's always possible that Pixar might someday drop these on their social media accounts, especially since the 20th anniversary of the Cars franchise is coming up next year and Lasseter isn't at the studio anymore, but I don't think it's very likely. The only way I think these will ever be publicly released is if some former Pixar animator just dumps it online someday. It happened for Shrek, so maybe it'll happen with Cars. But for now, they'll be trapped deep within the Pixar vaults. If I were to ask any Cars fan what they love about the franchise, I bet one of the things most would answer with would have to be the relationship between Lightning McQueen and Doc Hudson. The two start out heavily disliking each other, but over the course of the first film, grow to respect the other, with Doc eventually becoming Lightning's racing mentor and crew chief. Sadly, it's a bond that's very short-lived in the Cars canon, as due to the death of Paul Newman, Doc's voice actor, the character would be written out of Cars' sequels. But that wasn't always the plan. What if I told you that Doc was planned to be in Cars 2, even after Newman's death? This comes from an MTV article published about a month after Newman died in November 2008, claiming to have an exclusive scoop about Doc's role in the movie from director John Lasseter. He had previously told the outlet during WALL-E's premiere in June 2008 that Doc would be in the movie, and after Newman's death, stated that Pixar would see how the story goes with Doc Hudson, even bringing up the recasting of Slinky Dog in the then upcoming Toy Story 3 as an example of how they'd go about recasting Newman. But in the end, we all know that Pixar would decide to go against recasting Doc, simply choosing to write him out instead. But it does make you wonder what kind of role the character would have had in the movie. Cars 2 began pre-production immediately after the first film in 2006, and Paul Newman wouldn't pass away until September 2008. That's nearly 2 years that this movie spent in development with Doc planned to be in it. There's probably plenty of production material that exists with the character in it, maybe even a draft of the script. However, nothing from Cars 2's early development with Doc in it has ever been publicly released, and nothing about what his role in the story could have been has ever been revealed, just that he was in the movie at some point. We don't even know how long it was into development when the character was cut, although judging by how Lasseter seems very undecided if Doc will return in this article, I bet he was cut not long after this was published, and that's probably for the best. Judging by how Pixar opted to cut him from the final film, it seems like whatever role he would have served in Cars 2 wouldn't have been that major. He probably would have been on the sidelines like a lot of Cars 1's cast in that movie, and I don't think Cars 3's emotional moments would work nearly as well if they decided to keep Doc around. Hell, it would probably be a completely different movie. As for any chances of this pre-production material ever being found, I think it would have to be in a similar manner to the Cars animation test I just talked about, being put online by somebody who worked on the film or some sort of leaker. The first drafts of a couple Pixar films have leaked online before, so it is possible, but as of now, it seems like it's another piece of Cars media that'll stay in the Pixar vaults for the foreseeable future. That's how a lot of these segments are gonna end. Out of all the Cars movies and TV shows released over the years, I think the one that gets the least attention would have to be Tales from Radiator Springs, the second series of Cars tunes and the follow-up to Mater's Tall Tales. It's pretty easy to see why, too. It only had 4 episodes, about a third of the amount Mater's Tall Tales did, and only one of them received any sort of merchandise or marketing around it. It could have left more of an impact if it had received more episodes with a marketing push behind them, like with the Radiator Springs 500 and a half. And that was almost the case, as there were plans for another episode of Tales from Radiator Springs that ended up falling through. That episode being To Protect and Serve, probably the most well-known piece of Cars Lost media. This episode of the series would have revolved around Sheriff, or rather, its a lack of Sheriff, as the episode would have had him go on a mandated vacation out of town. 2 rookies take his place in the meantime, played by Aziz Ansari, probably butchered that, and Wendy McGlendon Covey, 2 actors best known for their roles in Parks and Recreation and The Goldbergs respectively. Comedy ensues with the 2 overdoing every aspect of their jobs and giving the residents of Radiator Springs all sorts of tickets and even forcing McQueen to participate in traffic school. A neat little callback to a deleted scene from the first Cars. Come to think of it, Radiator Springs 500 and a half has a reference to Lost, another deleted scene from Cars 1. Do you think if the series kept going, we would have gotten an episode referencing community service? Oh lord. Sheriff is enjoying his vacation when he mysteriously senses a disturbance in the force, returning back home and setting everything right. The short was originally scheduled to be released in 2015 and received plenty of merchandise to promote it, including diecasts of the Rookie Cops and Traffic School McQueen. I still own the latter to this day. And a storybook for kids, which is where a lot of the screenshots from this short, along with the general outline for its story, come from. Despite the big marketing push, To Protect and Serve completely missed its release date and no episodes of Cars tunes were made following its cancellation. most likely due to Pixar Canada, the division of Pixar responsible for Tales from Radiator Springs, shutting down. But taking a look at the tie-in storybook for the episode, it looks like it was completely finished. So why did Pixar pull the plug on it? That was a question left unanswered for years, but I was finally able to figure out what caused this short to go unreleased. And it comes from the most trustworthy source I could find, Reddit. Okay, stay with me here. I was browsing the Pixar Cars subreddit one night while working on this video, and just so happened to come across a post talking about this short, hoping that it'll be released someday. And among the comments sharing a similar sentiment or giving their own takes on why they think it'll stay lost into the foreseeable future, I saw one that gave out some very interesting info. This commenter said that the short was fully completed and just shelved, which we already knew, but also said that according to Jay Shuster, a former production designer at Pixar who worked on pretty much everything Cars up to and including On the Road, that the short was shelved due to police brutality controversy from the time, something that nobody else has talked about when discussing this short's cancellation. I decided to ask them about when Shuster said this, expecting maybe an interview or something, but the commenter said that Shuster had personally told them on Instagram. I'll take their word for it. I don't really know why the commenter would lie about this, and I don't want to scroll through Shuster's entire Instagram page just to find the one post where this happened. If it was even on a post, it could have been through DMs. But what event would have caused a big enough outroar for Pixar to shelve this short? Keep in mind, I was 6 years old in 2015, I wasn't paying attention to the news very much during this time. So, I decided to look into it and found several cases of police brutality in the US in both 2014 and 2015 that had nationwide attention. I'm not going to get into the specifics of these incidents. I feel like it would be a very inappropriate tonal shift in a video on Pixar's Cars, but it does explain why this short was never released. Disney and or Pixar higher-ups probably thought that having this short, depicting two police officers giving unfair punishments to the residents of a community in a goofy, comedic way, in the wake of real police brutality incidents that led to people losing their lives, could have been seen as insensitive. I personally don't agree with that line of thinking, because Cars is a cartoon. That's not to belittle animation as a medium. It can be used to tell amazing and heartfelt stories, something the Cars series itself has done, but To Protect and Serve wasn't trying to do that. It was made to be a cute little short made to get some chuckles out of you. And I feel like if it met its release date as intended, it would have been viewed as such. Not Pixar trying to mock police brutality and its victims. As for a potential release for this short, I think that out of all the topics covered in this video, it has the highest likelihood of coming out someday. It was fully finished, just shelved due to some real-world controversy that has since died down. Not saying that police brutality in the US isn't an issue anymore, but I feel like people are a little less reactionary and on edge towards the topic compared to 4 to 5 years ago. So I feel like they'd be able to release it now without any significant backlash. They probably wouldn't have if they did release it in 2015, but I'm thinking about this from Bob Iger's perspective, and it doesn't always make sense. If there's enough demand from Cars fans, I could see Disney finally releasing this short someday. Maybe even as part of Cars' 20th anniversary. That'd be really cool. So I guess the only thing we could really do now is make our voices heard. Let Disney and Pixar know that we want this to be released. Just don't be a douchebag or anything. Online harassment and death threats are never okay. Okay, this is... sorry if the audio sounds a little shittier here. This is post-production Jackson. I don't know where to fit this in the script, but I made a community post talking about this short, and just like on the Reddit thread, I found somebody made an interesting comment talking about how they remembered this short being on Netflix back when Disney still had their content up on there. it could very well be a Mandela effect or false memory. They get a couple of details wrong, like how this was apparently a Mater's Tall Tales episode, or that they impound McQueen instead of putting him in traffic school, but just thought I'd put it here because if it's true, that means that this short was available for a brief period of time and then we just didn't archive it. Alright, moving on to the next part of the video, the next part that I actually scripted out. Here we are, the largest section of the video, and it's all about Cars 3, the latest film in the franchise. Although, as we'll get into later, that wasn't always the plan. Last December, I made a video titled The Original Version of Cars 3. To summarize what it was about, the video went over Cars 3's early development and how at one point, it had a completely different story that went in more of a thriller direction similar to Cars 2, where McQueen and Cruz have their identity stolen and are framed for some sort of crime. In the 7 months since the video came out, there have been 2 major updates on this version of the movie, one regarding a scene from it, and another on its development history. Starting with the development info, there was a commenter on the video that claimed to have gotten in contact with Cars 3 production designer Bill Cohn, who told them that this version apparently had a different director, with Brian Fee, the director of the final version, instead being head of story. The commenter didn't reveal the identity of this director out of respect and privacy for their family, as they've sadly passed away in the years since Cars 3's release, although they did say that they had a major role in the production of Mater's Tall Tales, which is why they were chosen to direct. I think I know who they're talking about, but I also don't feel like revealing it out of respect, and just in case that I'm wrong. They also said John Lasseter had a lot more creative control over this version, being pretty butthurt about Cars 2's negative reception, and still wanting to go in a thriller direction for future movies, which is something I can confirm is actually true, at least to some extent, thanks to this statement Lasseter made about Cars 2's negative reviews at the film's premiere in Paris.
The first Cars was not liked by the critics either, but I'm glad to tell you, I don't make movies for film critics. I make the movies for the audience, and I'm very proud of Cars 2. It is one of the most fun movies I've ever made, and we're really proud of it. And it's the most beautiful film Pixar's made. It's so complex and gorgeous, and you'll see it's very special. It's a spy movie. They go around the world. It's very funny, you know, and it's a great follow-up to Cars, which I love as well. They're very personal stories for me. And Cars is unlike any film in history where it's actually gotten more popular over time. And we're very proud of that. And so I love this film. And like I said, I don't make movies for critics, I make it for the audience.
They also said this version went through development hell, with a bunch of issues going on with the story and it falling behind time and budget, which eventually led to Brian Fee taking over as director and making the movie as we know it today. They also revealed that the villain would have apparently been a wealthy man, which we'll get into in a moment. The second major leak actually happened during this video's post-production. A commenter told me that they had found some storyboards of this version while doing some research on it, and uploaded it to their YouTube channel. And I just have to talk about this because this leak is major. It is a 6, almost 7-minute scene from this version of the movie dating back to late 2013 and early 2014, complete with music, sound effects, and temp audio from Pixar employees. And it reveals not only who the main villain of the movie was and their evil scheme, but even shows a bit of the movie's climax and what Cruza looked like when they were still a male character. Ladies and Gentle-Cars, I introduce you to Gerald Carr, the original villain of Cars 3. The scene begins with him driving past some oil pumps, all of which are set up on the lawn of his Mima's house. He goes to visit her, the house being stacked up with all sorts of junk that Gerald bought with his wealth, and sent to her to get some respect, which she doesn't give him, calling him a waste of metal. talking about how he should look up to Lightning McQueen and look at how successful he is, showing him a news broadcast on her TV of Lightning announcing his retirement and proposing to Sally. Wait, proposing to Sally?!
What do you say? Will you marry me?
Yes.
Gerald's Mima instructs him to go down to his place in the basement, where it's revealed what exactly is going on here. This isn't Gerald, but McQueen inside of his body. That's right, Cars 3 was going to be a body swap movie, bringing back a scrapped concept from the first film. McQueen looks around the basement, finding all sorts of tools and even discovering a bulletin board with Gerald's plan on it. That being to swap bodies with McQueen to steal his identity and resume his life. So yeah, they were basically going to turn this into a whole movie. Although it seems that Gerald might have reconsidered his plan or something went awry, because McQueen is able to find his original body with no host. It's from this point that the action begins to ramp up, with the police coming to arrest Carr for his crimes, joined by Cruz, who told him out to the police. Like I said a moment ago, Cruz is a man in this version of the movie, and sports some sort of prototype design, being a basic white race car with a couple green stripes running through them, suggesting that the storyboards predate the ones I covered in my initial video, which showed Cruz as female and sporting a design closer to the one in the final movie. Against the police's will, Cruz goes in to find Carr, with McQueen letting him know who he truly is, showing the bulletin board he found earlier and saying that they can use it to prove his innocence. It's at this moment that the police throw some sort of bomb into the basement, causing a fire to break out and burn the bulletin board. Cruz says that their testimony will be enough to convince the police of his innocence, and tells McQueen that they need to leave, driving out of there. But McQueen is desperate at this point in the story, needing a way to preserve all of this evidence, with the basement burning down with him. The police enter the house after the fire is over to investigate, finding the basement to be completely incinerated, with Carr's body being completely charred. They note, however, that he has no engine or other car parts inside of him. They see a massive car-shaped hole in the wall, and continue their search. Cruz is heartbroken about McQueen's fate, but quickly changes it to a happy smile while looking at some sort of unknown object before the scene cuts out, implying that with only a few moments to spare, McQueen was able to get back in his original, marketable body and escape the fire. Like I said, this is a pretty big development, not only surrounding Cars 3's production, but the franchise's history as a whole, showing us a version of Cars 3 that, outside of Cruz being here, has pretty much nothing in common with what came out. It's really great to have something like this finally be accessible to the general public. I am glad it's out there, but this only reinforces my opinion from my initial video that this version of the movie wouldn't have been that good. There are some aspects I like about this version of Cars 3. I like that it returns to the themes of Americana from Cars 1 and the final version of Cars 3. And I like how this version would have focused more on McQueen and Sally's relationship, which hasn't received any major focus since the first film. But this whole body swap identity theft storyline just doesn't feel like Cars to me, and I think it would have done irreparable damage to the franchise if they ended up going down this route. Not only do I think it would have scared kids with it showing lifeless and dead cars, I know it would because I watched these as a kid, which in turn would have probably hurt merchandise sales. I mean, what kid is going to buy a Gerald diecast? He hurted McQueen! And after Cars 2 was panned by critics and audiences for jumping the shark with its spy plot, I think following it up with a movie introducing a sci-fi concept like body swapping to this franchise would have led to this movie being mocked by critics and general audiences, probably even more than Cars 2 was back when it first came out. Not only because it would show that Pixar didn't learn from Cars 2, but it also would have brought out some truly terrifying questions about this universe. Not that there isn't already some. It might have even killed the franchise if the damage was big enough. I respect everyone who worked on this version of the movie, especially the director. The commenter from earlier said that they were basically just a proxy for Lasseter, which I bet made their job a lot more difficult and even a bit sad for them, not really being able to make their own vision for the movie, and instead having to answer to John, sees a lady and his pants are real gone, Lasseter. I'm impressed they were able to make what seems to be an almost completed story within John's limitations, but this version of the movie just doesn't look like it would have been that good. And I'm very happy that Brian Fee took over and scrapped all this since it wasn't working, and gave us the movie we have today. One more thing I guess we should cover before moving on to the next subject is a deleted scene from the final version of the movie. According to interviews with Cars creative director Jay Ward and Cars 3 director Brian Fee, not only were there plans for Doc to have more screen time in Cars 3, to the point where they would have had to hire a Paul Newman sound-alike, but there was also a scene depicting the death of Doc Hudson in addition to all the other flashbacks we see of him in the movie. In Jay's words, it was a really tender moment where McQueen's driving and Doc's following him, and it's like the day your mentor passes away. However, the team thought that the scene was way too depressing, even for a Pixar movie, and it was cut. To this day, nothing from this scene has ever been shown. We only have Ward's description of it to go off of. There was a Lost Media Wiki thread from 2021 that brings up a testimony from someone claiming that it was online at some point, but even OP admits that it's very possible that it could have been a false memory. And unlike the early version of Cars 3 we just discussed, I think it's probably going to stay that way. I could see a former employee posting more info online about the original version, or Pixar themselves talking about it in a 20th anniversary documentary. But as for this dock scene, not only is this going to be in the Pixar vaults till the end of time, but it's probably guarded by the Disney firing squad, along with all the other stuff they don't want to leak. But who knows? I could be wrong. You see, the Cars 3 identity theft storyboards aren't the only Cars 3 storyboards to be discovered recently. They're actually one of 6 found within the last week. The identity theft storyboards were found on the website of story artist John Hoffman, alongside 2 other scenes from the final film. And shortly after these storyboards were discovered, another YouTuber named Finar Studios discovered more storyboards from Cars 3 on the website of another story artist named Sam Hood, and are from the controversial alternate ending where McQueen actually raced in the Florida 500. Although unlike Hoffman's storyboards, these have no sound. Who knows, maybe we will get to see more lost Cars 3 content in the future. Unlike Cars 1, it's not super old, so there's a much better chance of us being able to find stuff like this from people who worked on it. But for now, let's just thank these 2 for finally bringing these into the light. It is the biggest Cars content that we've seen in a while. I'm not counting Cars Babies, that doesn't come out till 2027. The Planes series is a super weird part of Cars' history with a divisive reputation to match. They weren't made by Pixar, have very little connection to the main Cars movies outside of a couple characters and Easter eggs, and after their release, have never been acknowledged by the main series or Disney as a whole. Even the Planes diecast line hasn't been reprinted in nearly a decade now. It was a weird experiment that made some money, but not enough to stick around. That was almost not the case though, as there were plans at one point to make at least 4 more Cars spin-offs focused on other types of vehicles. The first of these was Disney's Trucks, which was in development in 2012 alongside Planes, and that's all we really know about it. We don't even know what studio was making it, but if the time period is to be believed, it was probably Disney Toon Studios, the people behind the Planes films. All we have to go off of is the series of storyboards by artist Bill Perkins, who was also a storyboard artist on Planes, once again suggesting that it was a Disney Toon production. We're missing a lot of context, so we don't exactly know what the story for Trucks would have been, but from the looks of it, the movie was a mystery action flick starring this pickup truck cop as the main character. and also would have made Stanford University canon to the Cars cinematic universe. Out of all the things I've ever said in my life, that is something I never thought I would. The next cancelled Cars spin-off was Boats, which was in development around the same time as Trucks and Planes, although unlike Trucks, there has been nothing from it that's resurfaced. The only evidence the film ever existed comes from a 2012 interview with screenwriting duo Bob Hilgenberg and Rob Muir. The interview mainly focuses on their time at Circle 7 Animation, which is a story for a whole other video, but it also goes over their time working at Disney Toon on the studio's Tinkerbell films, and they mention how while working on those movies, they got to meet the crew working on Planes, and see the other Cars spin-offs which were being developed, apparently being a Boats movie and a Trains movie we'll get to later. Another Planes film, referred to as Planes 3 internally, was also in the works and was announced shortly after Cars 3's release at that year's D23 Expo, and scheduled for release in 2019. Despite the name though, it seems like Planes 3 would have been a standalone sequel, with no ties to the previous Planes movies. Not only that, but the movie went through multiple working titles such as Space and Beyond the Sky, which seems like it would have been the movie's final name had it been released. Similar to Cars 3, Planes 3 would have focused on the progression of technology with the X-Plane program, an initiative focused on building the first aircraft capable of traveling into space, with the program finally achieving so with their latest model, the X-85. That's all we really know about Beyond the Sky's story. There's a character in some storyboards named Blaze that looks like they were going to be the film's main character, but that's never been confirmed. In the year since its cancellation, we haven't had a lot from the film resurface, but what has is pretty big. There's some storyboards, including a full animatic for the reveal of the X-85, where Blaze begins to feel insecure and is mocked for being a test plane who has no purpose anymore.
Impossible dream. It's like they're talking about you, Crash Test.
It's Blaze.
You gave yourself a call sign? Sad. You're a test plane, hun. And now you're done.
As well as a test animation depicting two jets soaring through the desert before an X-85 drops down from space and cuts them off, which was apparently shown off to the press behind closed doors at D23 2017. The final scrapped Cars spin-off that we currently know about is Metro, which was being worked on around the same time as Beyond the Sky, but unlike that film was never publicly revealed, us only knowing about it through leaks, although it was apparently planned to release in 2021. The film would have been about a subway train in the big city, but outside of that basic premise, we don't know much about its story besides that it was, and I quote, a cross between a specific Walter Hill film from the 1970s and a specific Martin Scorsese film from the 80s. And I don't know enough about either director's filmography to know what that means. This little tidbit comes from Metro's director, Steve Loader, who, after the concept art leaked online, revealed several other pieces of information regarding Metro's development on his Twitter. And from what he said, it seems like the movie was pretty far along when it was canned, as not only did they lock in Raphael Saadiq as the movie's composer, but actor and comedian Jermaine Fowler as the voice of the lead character. As for why all these movies were canned, it's pretty easy to explain why. At least for Beyond the Sky and Metro, we still have no idea what happened to Trucks and Boats. Disney Toon, the studio making all of these spin-off films, was shut down in 2018 due to the rise of streaming services pretty much killing the idea of the direct-to-DVD film, which was Disney Toon's bread and butter. It's a shame too, because for how little of these movies we've seen, they look promising and are a great way to continue making films in the Cars universe without milking the main series dry with unnecessary sequels. I know the first Planes isn't exactly that great. It's basically mid the movie, but the sequel, well, still not as good as the Cars movies, was a pretty big improvement and something you could tell that the team behind was super passionate about. And if these Cars spin-offs were to continue this upward trajectory, I know for a fact that if these movies released, they would have been amazing. And with that, we've officially moved on to the last topic of the video, which is, fittingly, about the series' latest major entry, Cars on the Road. Due to On the Road being a Disney Plus show instead of a feature-length film, it had a much quicker development time, the entire show being produced in only 15 months compared to the 5 to 6 years the movies took. But despite the quick turnaround time, On the Road still has plenty of ideas that never saw the light of day. According to a super obscure interview with the series crew by POC Culture, like it barely has 300 views, Pixar had multiple ideas for what the series would even be before landing on the road trip premise. And even after that, the series went through various changes, one of those being the episode count, and how there were supposed to be double the amount of episodes we ended up getting.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that part of it, and the character. Speaking of the road trip, Steve, you piqued all of our interest at the press conference when you said at first there were twice as many stops that you all came up with. Was there one or two that you, or that any of you, but starting with Steve, would have wanted to do that couldn't make it?
There were none that we wanted to do any more than the ones that we have. So I thought we got to do a really nice range of places that are really different from each other and just kind of totally expand this world. So I'm really satisfied with what we got to do.
The interview didn't mention what any of these scrapped episodes were about, just in case the show ever got picked up for a second season, but it hasn't stopped fans from speculating what they might have been. Back when Mattel began releasing merchandise based on the series, they'd released a playset based on a location named the Dynaco Rusty's Racing Center, a remodeled version of the Rusty's Racing Center from Cars 3 after Rusty's merged with Dynaco at the end of the film. However, the Racing Center doesn't appear in Cars on the Road, nor is it even mentioned, which has led some people to speculate that it might have been a part of an episode that was scrapped. Not only that, but there was also an insider leak in 2021 that said the characters from the Planes films were going to make an appearance in the show, all played by their original actors. Keep in mind though, none of these have been confirmed by Pixar themselves. This isn't the first time Mattel has made up characters or locations for the Cars toy line before. I recall back when the diecast line for Radiator Springs 500½ came out, that they had a diecast of an off-road Mater design that never appears in the short, and as far as I'm aware, was never going to. As for the leak about Planes characters being in the show, I think this is just blatantly false, because this leak gets so many details about the series wrong, mainly with the cast, and I don't think they could just be hand-waved away with the excuse that the show was still in development at the time. According to this leak, Owen Wilson wouldn't be voicing McQueen, and instead by sound-alike Keith Ferguson, who's been a stand-in for Owen going back to the first film's pre-production.
Have you seen my driver? Big, ugly guy? Kinda slow?
This makes sense. It's always been a coin toss if Owen voices McQueen in any Cars media outside of the movies. Maybe Keith was going to play him before they learned Owen was available to voice him. This is the most believable part of the leak, because the other cast members it mentions are Richard Petty, Jeff Gordon, Dale Earnhardt Jr., Corbin Bleu, Billy Ray Cyrus, Vincent Martella, Mitchell Musso, Bob Peterson, and Brett Iwan as Bobby Swift's crew chief and another character named Tony. Just Tony. Whatever Pixar's original plans for Cars on the Road were, whether that be the scrapped episodes or the completely rejected premises, premisi? There's gotta be a better word for that. They'll probably never see the light of day. Not only because it's been 3 years since the series came out with no Season 2 announcement, in fact, Pixar's announced they'll be moving their focus away from streaming in the future, but also because people like Cars on the Road writer Steve Purcell have left Pixar in the years since its release. And there you have it. Every piece of Cars media that was cancelled or lost to the sands of time. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, maybe subscribe, and leave a comment down below. I'm always curious to see what people think about topics like these. I'm not a big channel with a lot of influence, but I hope that this inspires someone to start looking for these pieces of lost media. Who knows? In a couple years' time, maybe To Protect and Serve will be publicly available. Maybe we'll have the Cars test animations or early drafts of Cars 2. Maybe we'll get to see more from these cancelled spin-off movies. we've already got more from the original Cars 3, so one can dream. But for now, I've said all that I've wanted to. This video took a very long time to make, in case you couldn't tell by the length, and amount of topics I had to research. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you next time.